The underground command center beneath EXRA headquarters in Colorado Springs hummed with a quiet intensity that belied the magnitude of the moment. Holographic displays flickered with real-time data streams, tracking the alien vessel's approach with mathematical precision. Lieutenant Emma Reese stood perfectly still, her dark eyes reflecting the cascade of information dancing across the screens. "Incoming transmission," announced Marcus Rodriguez, the young communications specialist seated at the primary quantum relay station. His fingers hovered over a keyboard that looked almost antiquated compared to the advanced holographic interfaces surrounding him. "Concordance first contact protocol initiating." Emma nodded, her posture betraying none of the nervous energy that coursed through the room. Years of preparation had led to this moment, a moment most of her colleagues believed would never come. The alien vessel was nothing like the dramatic representations found in decades of science fiction. No massive city-sized ships. No dramatic weaponry erupting from metallic hulls. Instead, it appeared almost disappointingly mundane. A sleek, obsidian-like probe approximately the size of a commercial satellite, moving with calculated efficiency through Earth's outer orbital range. Commander Zixolar, commanding the initial survey mission, viewed the blue planet with a mixture of bureaucratic disinterest and mild scientific curiosity. Humanity was just another entry in the countless planetary surveys conducted by the Galactic Concordance. Preliminary data suggested a pre-spacefaring civilization, technologically primitive, socially fractured. Exactly the type of planet typically marked for future resource assessment. What Zixolar didn't realize was that every microscopic movement of their probe was being analyzed, tracked, and catalogued with meticulous detail. "Initial spectral analysis complete," Marcus reported. His fingers danced across the interface, routing information through a labyrinthine network of quantum communication relays. "They're using standard long-range scanning protocols." Predictable. Emma's lips curved into the slightest hint of a smile. Predictability was precisely what they wanted the Concordance to believe. The command center was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. 12 specialists from diverse backgrounds, linguists, quantum physicists, military strategists, and communication experts, worked in perfect synchronization. Each wore a specialized neural interface that allowed instantaneous data sharing and communication, a technology so advanced it would appear like magic to most of the world's population. Jack Thompson, seated in the far corner, monitored the alien probe's communication frequencies. His background in NSA cryptanalysis made him uniquely suited to this task. Where others saw random electromagnetic noise, he perceived intricate patterns waiting to be decoded and manipulated. "They're attempting standard communication protocols," Jack announced, his voice calm and clinical. "Primarily electromagnetic and quantum entanglement-based transmissions. Textbook approach." What the Concordance didn't know was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for decades, not through military might or technological superiority, but through something far more subtle and powerful: strategic unpredictability. The probe continued its methodical scanning, collecting atmospheric compositions, measuring electromagnetic emissions, and attempting to categorize Earth's technological capabilities. Its artificial intelligence was designed to provide comprehensive planetary assessments, a process that typically took several Earth months. Emma knew they had precisely 37 minutes to make their first impression. "Initiate Phase 1, she commanded softly. Across the globe, a meticulously planned communication strategy began to unfold. In major cities, communication networks would experience brief, seemingly random disruptions. Satellite transmissions would flicker. Internet backbones would show momentary instabilities that would appear completely natural to an outside observer. To the Concordance's survey probe, these would look like the expected chaos of a developing technological civilization. But each disruption was carefully engineered, each moment of static a deliberate message. Marcus grinned, catching Emma's eye. "They won't know what hit them." The alien probe continued its survey, utterly unaware that it was already caught in an intricate psychological trap. Humanity's first contact would not be a moment of submission or terror, but a calculated dance of information and misdirection. Commander Xuxlar reviewed the initial planetary scan, completely missing the sophisticated layers of deception being woven around their seemingly mundane mission. In the vast, bureaucratic machine of the Galactic Concordance, Earth was just another potential resource, a classification that would soon prove catastrophically incorrect. The Galactic Concordance Communication Analysis Center orbited a neutron star, a massive structure that defied conventional engineering understanding. Sleek crystalline corridors stretched for kilometers, housing thousands of linguistic experts, communication theorists, and sinological researchers. At its heart, the primary interpretation chamber buzzed with an energy of growing frustration. Voxerin, chief of sinolinguistic research, stared at the holographic displays with mounting irritation. His four-fingered hands clenched and unclenched, a nervous tic that betrayed his growing anxiety. The Earth data made no sense, and, in the concordance, things were expected to make sense. "Replay the transmission sequence," he commanded the primary AI interface. The hologram shifted, displaying a chaotic array of communication fragments. Radio waves, quantum entanglement signals, electromagnetic bursts, all seemingly random, yet something beneath the chaos suggested deliberate design. Dr. Lyra Ktal, a junior communication analyst, leaned forward. Unlike her more senior colleagues, she saw something others missed. "These aren't random," she whispered, her translucent skin shifting color with intellectual excitement, a physiological response typical of her species. The transmissions from Earth defied every known communication model. Some bursts lasted microseconds. Others stretched across hours, carrying what appeared to be nothing more than background noise. Yet each transmission was meticulously encrypted, with complexity that made even the Concordance's most advanced decryption systems struggle. "Look here," Lyra pointed to a particular sequence. "The communication pattern suggests intentional obfuscation." Voxerin scoffed. "Primitive species don't create intentional obfuscation. They communicate. They're predictable." But Earth was anything but predictable. Half a galaxy away, in the EXRA command center, Emma Reese watched the Concordance's confusion with clinical satisfaction. Every transmission was a carefully constructed puzzle, designed to consume computational resources and create maximum uncertainty. Jack Thompson approached her, a tablet displaying complex algorithmic patterns. "We're burning through their computational capacity," he said quietly. "Each decryption attempt is costing them exponentially more processing power than the last transmission's complexity." It was psychological warfare at its most sublime, fought entirely through communication. The Concordance had encountered thousands of developing civilizations. Their standard protocols were comprehensive, their assessment methods mathematically precise. A typical planetary survey would reveal technological capability, social structure, potential resource value, threat assessment. Earth was revealing nothing and everything. Voxerin escalated the investigation. Additional computational resources were diverted. Specialized sinolinguistic teams were assembled. Each new approach was met with another layer of deliberate complexity. In one transmission, they would detect what seemed like military communication codes. Elaborate encryption suggested advanced technological capabilities. The next transmission would be nothing more than what appeared to be environmental background noise: wind, water, distant mechanical sounds. "It's like they're playing with us," muttered a junior analyst. Lyra Kuttel knew it was more than that. These transmissions were a message in themselves, a declaration of intellectual capability disguised as confusion. Back on Earth, the EXRA team had transformed communication into a form of psychological martial art. Each transmission was a carefully choreographed dance, revealing just enough to provoke curiosity, while concealing everything meaningful. Military satellite communications would briefly mirror civilian broadcast frequencies. Financial data streams would show impossible economic fluctuations that disappeared moments later. Quantum communication relays would send burst transmissions that seemed to originate from multiple contradictory locations simultaneously. The Concordance was accustomed to civilizations that were transparent, predictable. They had developed assessment protocols over millennia of galactic exploration. Humanity was rewriting those protocols with every transmission. "We need a different approach," Lyra argued in the next strategy meeting. "These aren't random communications. They're a deliberate strategy." Voxerin remained skeptical. To him, humanity was just another developing species, no different from hundreds they had cataloged before. He was about to learn how wrong he could be. In the EXRA command center, Emma Reese allowed herself the slightest smile. Phase 2 of their communication strategy was about to begin, and the Concordance wouldn't know what hit them. The breakthrough came on a Tuesday that would later be marked as a turning point in human-alien relations. Jack Thompson's fingers moved with surgical precision across a custom-built quantum interface, lines of code cascading faster than any human eye could track. Around him, the EXRA command center had transformed into a high-stakes communication laboratory, every system pushed to its absolute limit. "Got something," he muttered, though no one needed to hear him. The neural interfaces connecting the team ensured that every team member was already processing the same information. What Jack had discovered was nothing short of revolutionary. The alien communication systems, supposedly the most advanced in the known galaxy, had a fundamental weakness. They relied on predictive linguistic algorithms that assumed all communication followed established logical patterns. Humanity's communication strategy was anything but logical. Emma Reese studied the holographic display, her mind working several steps ahead. "It's not about breaking their code," she explained to the team. "It's about making them question the very foundation of their communication models." Across the galaxy, in the Concordance's Communication Analysis Center, panic was beginning to set in. Voxerin had been replaced by a special investigative team, each member more frustrated than the last. They had thrown unprecedented computational power at the Earth transmissions, and each attempt yielded nothing but more questions. Dr. Lyra Cole found herself at the center of a growing controversy. Her initial observations had been dismissed, but now they were becoming impossible to ignore. The human communication strategy was so complex that it bordered on being a form of mathematical art. "Look at the transmission patterns," she argued during an emergency council meeting. The holographic display showed a mind-bending array of communication fragments. "These aren't random. They're deliberately constructed to consume our analytical resources." The Concordance had a fatal weakness: bureaucratic certainty. They believed in systematic approaches, in predictable patterns. Humanity was exploiting that weakness with surgical precision. Jack's breakthrough involved creating an adaptive communication algorithm that could instantaneously shift communication patterns. When alien linguists thought they'd decoded a pattern, the entire human communication strategy would transform, leaving them bewildered. Marcus Rodriguez, monitoring global communication networks, grinned. "We're turning their own technology against them." The strategy was multilayered. Military communication networks would suddenly mirror civilian broadcast frequencies. Financial data streams would show impossible economic fluctuations that disappeared moments later. Quantum communication relays would send burst transmissions that seemed to originate from multiple contradictory locations simultaneously. In one particularly brilliant move, EXRA created what they internally called communication honeypots, elaborate false communication channels designed to consume alien computational resources. Each honeypot was a labyrinth of encrypted nonsense, mathematically constructed to be just coherent enough to demand attention, but ultimately meaningless. Voxerin's replacement, a hardline communication theorist named Krelnax, demanded more aggressive approaches. "We must send a direct communication," he argued. "Force them to respond on our terms." Little did they know, that was exactly what humanity wanted. Emma understood something fundamental about communication that the Concordance had forgotten. Information is not just about content, but about context, uncertainty, and perception. Each transmission from Earth was a psychological weapon. Sometimes they would reveal fragments of seemingly advanced technological data. Other times, the transmissions would be nothing more than environmental background noise. Wind, water, distant mechanical sounds. The Concordance's communication systems, designed to process millions of planetary communications simultaneously, began to slow down. Their quantum computing networks, tasked with decrypting and analyzing the Earth transmissions, were being overwhelmed. "We're not just blocking their communication," Jack explained during a team briefing. "We're making communication itself a form of warfare." Diplomatic channels became increasingly tense. Some Concordance leaders recommended immediate preemptive action, while others argued for continued observation. The very act of trying to understand humanity was consuming vast computational and bureaucratic resources. Dr. Lyra Call was the first to fully comprehend the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity wasn't just defending itself, it was rewriting the fundamental rules of interstellar communication. As the Concordance debated its next move, Emma Reese allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. Phase 3 was about to begin, and the aliens had no idea what was coming. The war was being fought in microseconds, across quantum networks that spanned light years, and humanity was weaponizing information in ways the Galactic Concordance could never have anticipated. Emma Reese stood in the EXRA command center, a holographic globe rotating slowly before her. Each point of light represented a communication relay, a node in humanity's increasingly complex information network. What appeared to be a simple global communication system was actually the most sophisticated psychological warfare platform ever conceived. "Initiate Phase 4, she said quietly. Jack Thompson's fingers danced across multiple interfaces, releasing a series of communication packets designed to do more than just confuse. They were engineered to destabilize the very foundation of alien intelligence gathering. The first wave targeted the Concordance's most fundamental assumption, that technological complexity correlates with predictability. Across Earth, seemingly unrelated systems began to interact in impossible ways. Military satellite communications would briefly mirror civilian broadcast frequencies. Financial data streams showed economic fluctuations that defied mathematical models. Quantum communication relays sent burst transmissions that appeared to originate from multiple contradictory locations simultaneously. Dr. Krelnax, the Concordance's lead investigator, watched in mounting frustration as their most advanced analytical systems began to strain under the weight of human unpredictability. "It's like they're deliberately creating computational chaos," Lyra Ktal observed, her translucent skin shifting with intellectual excitement. She was quickly becoming the only voice of reason within the Concordance's communication analysis team. The psychological warfare had multiple layers. Each transmission was a carefully constructed puzzle. Some broadcasts contained fragments of seemingly advanced technological data. Others were nothing more than environmental background noise. Occasional transmissions mimicked military communication codes. Intermittent signals suggested complex technological capabilities. Marcus Rodriguez managed the global communication infrastructure, his neural interface allowing him to coordinate thousands of communication nodes with a thought. "We're not just blocking their analysis," he explained to Emma. "We're making them question everything they know about information gathering." The true genius of the strategy was its multi-dimensional nature. It wasn't just about hiding information. It was about creating an information environment so complex that the very act of trying to understand it consumed massive computational resources. Deep within secure facilities around the globe, teams of linguists, mathematicians, and communication specialists worked in perfect synchronization. They were creating a new form of warfare, one where uncertainty was the primary weapon. Jack had developed an adaptive communication algorithm that could instantaneously shift communication patterns. The moment alien linguists believed they'd decoded a pattern, the entire human communication strategy would transform, leaving them bewildered. "Look at this," Jack said, pulling up a complex holographic display. "We're not just sending information. We're sending meta-information. layers of communication that comment on the act of communication itself. Each transmission was a psychological trap. The Concordance's communication systems, designed to process millions of planetary communications simultaneously, began to slow down. Their quantum computing networks, tasked with decrypting and analyzing Earth's transmissions, were being overwhelmed. Emma understood something fundamental. Information is not just about content, but about context, uncertainty, and perception. The Concordance had developed communication assessment protocols over millennia of galactic exploration. They had encountered thousands of developing civilizations, each following predictable patterns of technological and social development. Humanity was rewriting those protocols with every transmission. Diplomatic channels became increasingly tense. Some Concordance leaders recommended immediate preemptive action, while others argued for continued observation. The very act of trying to understand humanity was consuming vast computational and bureaucratic resources. They're turning communication into a weapon, Lyra argued during an emergency council meeting. This isn't just defense. This is a complete reimagining of information warfare. Voxrin, now relegated to an advisory position, watched the unfolding scenario with a mixture of professional terror and grudging admiration. Humanity was doing something unprecedented. They were fighting a war by making the very act of understanding them an impossibly complex task. As the Concordance debated its next move, Emma Reese allowed herself the slightest smile. Phase 4 was proceeding exactly as planned. The real invasion wasn't coming with ships or weapons. It was already happening, one quantum transmission at a time. The Concordance invasion fleet emerged from quantum-slipped space with the clinical precision of a surgical instrument. 300 vessels, a mix of reconnaissance probes, heavy assault platforms, and support infrastructure, positioned themselves in a mathematically perfect formation around Earth's orbital range. Commander Zegselar studied the holographic tactical display, confidence radiating from every calculated movement. This was a standard planetary assessment protocol. Thousands of civilizations had been processed through similar procedures. Humanity would be no different. They were catastrophically wrong. The first indication came when the fleet's primary quantum communication network experienced a series of impossible disruptions. Communication relays between ships began to fracture in ways that defied known physical laws. Navigation systems flickered. Quantum encryption protocols, considered unbreakable, began to unravel like cheap fabric. Jack Thompson watched from the EXRA command center, a predatory smile playing across his features. "They're in the system," he said quietly. Emma Reese nodded. The resistance had begun long before the first ship entered Earth's orbital space. What the Concordance didn't understand was that humanity's defense wasn't about traditional military might. It was about turning the invasion's own technological superiority into a weapon of unprecedented sophistication. Automated drone swarms, powered by quantum AI, began to materialize seemingly from nowhere. These weren't large, impressive combat vessels. They were small, almost insignificant-looking probes that moved with a collective intelligence that bordered on the miraculous. Each drone was a node in a vast, distributed computational network. They didn't fight. They confused. They disrupted. They transformed the very physics of space around the invasion fleet. Quantum interference pattern initiated, Marcus Rodriguez announced, his fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. They won't even know what's hitting them. The drones didn't attack in any conventional sense. Instead, they created localized quantum uncertainty fields that made precise navigation impossible. Communication between Concordance ships became increasingly fragmented. Navigation systems began to report contradictory spatial information. Lyra Catal, watching from the Concordance Communication Center, recognized what was happening before anyone else. "They're not defending," she said, her voice a mixture of terror and admiration. "They're transforming the very rules of engagement." Zegselar's tactical displays began to show impossible scenarios. Ships reported being in multiple locations simultaneously. Quantum positioning systems returned nonsensical data. It was as if the very fabric of space around Earth had become a mathematical nightmare. The invasion fleet's first wave of reconnaissance drones approached Earth's orbital range and simply disappeared. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply ceased to exist in any measurable way. Quantum translocation detected, a junior concordance officer reported, his voice trembling. But that's impossible. Nothing about humanity was following any established protocols. Emma understood the psychological warfare they were implementing. This wasn't about defeating the concordance militarily. This was about making them question the fundamental laws of physics and technology they believed they understood. Jack had developed a communication disruption algorithm that was now being deployed across multiple quantum and electromagnetic spectrums. Each concordance ship found its systems increasingly compromised. Navigation became a nightmare. Communication dissolved into mathematical gibberish. The invasion fleet's perfect formation began to fragment. Ships started to lose synchronization. Quantum communication networks, the nervous system of their technological superiority, began to collapse from within. "We're not blocking their technology," Emma explained to her team. "We're making their technology block itself." Stealth technologies rendered human defensive installations virtually undetectable. When concordance sensors tried to locate potential defensive positions, they would receive contradictory data. A mountain might appear as an empty plain. A seemingly innocuous communication relay would return computational complexity that would take years to analyze. Zuxeller's confidence began to crack. Every tactical maneuver was anticipated. Every invasion strategy dissolved before it could be fully executed. "This isn't possible," he muttered, watching tactical displays that made less and less sense. Lyra Kittle knew better. Humanity wasn't just defending. They were playing a multi-dimensional strategic game that existed on levels the concordance couldn't even comprehend. As the invasion fleet's formation continued to dissolve, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Earth wasn't just resisting. It was teaching the concordance an entirely new understanding of warfare. 72 hours of absolute silence. No transmissions, no quantum signatures, no electromagnetic whispers. Earth became a void that consumed the concordance's computational resources with its very absence. Commander Emma Reese stood in the EXRA command center, surrounded by a team that had transformed communication into an art of war. Jack Thompson monitored complex quantum interfaces, his fingers occasionally twitching as he made microscopic adjustments to their global communication network. Total blackout initiated, Marcus Rodriguez announced, though no announcement was truly necessary. The neural interfaces connecting the team meant every thought. Every calculation was shared instantaneously. In the Concordance's central communication hub, panic was beginning to take hold. Dr. Lyra Tall watched in fascination as her colleagues descended into increasing madness. The human planet had become a computational singularity, an impossible void that consumed more analytical resources by its silence than it ever had by communication. Voxrin, now a marginalized advisor, understood first. "They're burning our systems," he muttered. "Not with attacks, with uncertainty." The silence was weaponized mathematics. Each moment of quiet was a carefully constructed algorithm designed to push the Concordance's communication systems to their absolute limit. Quantum computing networks that had never known true challenge now found themselves trapped in endless loops of probabilistic analysis. What could a civilization do when confronted with absolute, perfect silence? Jack's adaptive communication algorithm had evolved into something beyond mere defense. It was a living system that could predict and manipulate the Concordance's analytical approaches faster than they could adjust. "We're not just blocking their communication," Jack explained during a team briefing. "We're making communication itself an impossible task." The trap had multiple layers. Quantum communication relays that existed in states of simultaneous existence and non-existence. Electromagnetic signatures that defied standard physical models. Communication protocols that consumed more computational power to analyze than they could potentially reveal. Every concordance system designed to process planetary communications was now trapped in an endless recursive loop, Attempting to analyze the human silence consumed more resources than any previous communication strategy. It's like they've turned mathematics into a weapon, Lyra Catal argued during an emergency concordance council meeting. Her translucent skin shifted with intellectual excitement. They're not defending. They're redefining the entire concept of communication. Commander Ezexilar found himself in an unprecedented situation. Invasion protocols, carefully developed over millennia, suddenly seemed like primitive guesswork. Every tactical approach dissolved before it could be fully conceptualized. The human strategy was breathtakingly simple and impossibly complex, make the very act of understanding them more resource-intensive than any potential benefit of invasion. Automated drone swarms continued their quantum dance around Earth's orbital range. These weren't traditional defensive platforms. They were computational mirages, systems that could exist in multiple states simultaneously, consuming alien analytical resources with their very existence. Emma Reese understood the psychological warfare they were implementing. This wasn't about defeating the Concordants militarily. This was about making them question the fundamental laws of information, communication, and technological superiority. Phase 6 is proceeding exactly as planned, she said quietly, though the entire team was already aware. The silence continued. Hours stretched into days. The Concordance's most advanced systems began to show signs of computational fatigue. Analytical networks that had processed thousands of planetary communications simultaneously now found themselves trapped in an impossible mathematical puzzle. Jack's communication disruption algorithms were inserting subtle, almost imperceptible errors into alien communication networks. Each error was a quantum seed that would gradually destabilize their entire communication infrastructure. "We're not just defending," Jack explained. "We're conducting a surgical strike against their entire communication paradigm." Lyra Catal was the only one who truly appreciated the magnitude of what was happening. Humanity wasn't just resisting. They were teaching the Concordants an entirely new understanding of warfare, a war fought in microseconds, across quantum networks that spanned light years. As the silence continued, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Earth wasn't just surviving. It was transforming the very concept of interstellar conflict. The breakdown began in the most unexpected of places, the Concordance Central Philosophical Archives. Dr. Lyra Catal stood before the Grand Council, her presentation a systematic deconstruction of everything the galactic civilization believed about technological and cultural development. Behind her, holographic displays flickered with impossible data streams captured from Earth's communication strategies. "We have been fundamentally wrong," she declared, her translucent skin shifting through shades of intellectual intensity. "Humanity is not a developing civilization. They are a completely different form of intelligent system." The Grand Council chamber, a massive spherical room that had hosted countless planetary assessments, fell into a silence more profound than Earth's quantum communications. Commander Isitilar, now a disgraced diplomatic figure, watched from the periphery. His career had become a cautionary tale about underestimating an unknown civilization. The invasion fleet that had seemed so invincible now sat in orbital detention, its systems slowly being dismantled by the very communication strategies it had sought to overcome. Back in the EXRA command center, Emma Reese understood the deeper game. This wasn't about military victory. This was about forcing the Concordants to reimagine the very concept of intelligent communication. Jack Thompson pulled up a series of complex algorithmic models. "We're not just a species," he explained to the team. "We're a complex adaptive system that treats information as a living organism." The human strategy had multiple layers of brilliance. Transform communication into a weapon. Make understanding itself a resource-intensive process. Create uncertainty as a defensive mechanism. Challenge fundamental assumptions about technological progression. The Concordants had encountered thousands of developing civilizations. Each followed predictable patterns. Initial technological development. Resource accumulation. Potential military expansion. Integration or elimination. Humanity was rewriting those protocols with every quantum transmission. Dr. Voxrin, once the most rigid of communication theorists, now stood as a transformed advocate. "They've done something unprecedented," he told the Grand Council. "They've weaponized potential. Not just actual capability, but the very concept of capability itself." Lyra's presentation continued, breaking down the human communication strategy layer by layer. Each slide revealed a more complex understanding of how humanity processed information. "Traditional metrics of civilization development are meaningless," she argued. "Humanity doesn't develop technology. They evolve communication strategies that make technology irrelevant." The implications were staggering. If humanity could transform communication itself into a defensive weapon, what other fundamental assumptions might be wrong? Marcus Rodriguez monitored global communication networks, a smile playing across his features. The EXRA team had transformed human civilization into a living, adaptive communication organism. Every transmission was a potential weapon. Every moment of silence was a strategic calculation. The Concordance leadership began to realize their fundamental mistake. They had assumed technological superiority meant cultural superiority. Humanity demonstrated that psychological flexibility, adaptive intelligence, and the ability to turn uncertainty into a strategic advantage were far more powerful than any advanced weapon system. Emma Reese understood the deeper philosophical battle. This wasn't just about defending against an invasion. This was about challenging the Concordance's entire understanding of intelligence, communication, and civilizational development. "We're not just a species," she had told her team earlier. "We're a proof of concept for a completely different approach to existence." The quantum communication networks that had once seemed impenetrable now looked like primitive technologies. Humanity had demonstrated an approach to information that was less about transmission and more about transformation. Zexilar approached Lyra after her presentation. "How did we miss this?" he asked, his voice a mixture of professional defeat and genuine curiosity. "We were looking for a civilization," Lyra responded. "They presented us with a communication strategy." In the EXRA command center, Jack continued to monitor and adjust their global communication network. Each adjustment was a microscopic revolution, a reimagining of how intelligence systems might interact. The Concordance was being forced to create an entirely new diplomatic protocol. Humanity would serve as the unpredictable variable that challenged every existing interstellar relationship and understanding of intelligent communication. As the presentation concluded, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity was not just another species to be cataloged and understood. They were a fundamental reimagining of what intelligence could be. The Concordance Diplomatic Reconstitution Chamber was unlike any meeting space in known galactic history. Suspended in quantum-stabilized space, its walls shifted between transparency and solid matter, reflecting the fundamental uncertainty that humanity had introduced to interstellar relations. Commander Emma Reese stood at the center, surrounded by representatives from hundreds of galactic civilizations. Jack Thompson and Marcus Rodriguez were positioned strategically behind her, their neural interfaces maintaining constant communication despite being physically separated. Dr. Lyra Ktal, now serving as a primary liaison between humanity and the Concordance, introduced the proceedings. Her translucent skin rippled with complex emotional patterns that few species could fully interpret. "Humanity is not requesting inclusion," she announced. "We are presenting a new model of interstellar interaction." The chamber fell silent. What humanity had accomplished went far beyond a simple defensive victory. They had fundamentally transformed the concept of technological and cultural development. The invasion fleet that had seemed so invincible now sat as a testament to the power of adaptive communication. Jack's quantum communication algorithms had done more than defend. They had demonstrated a completely new approach to interstellar relations, one where information itself was the most powerful weapon, and unpredictability was the ultimate defense. The Concordance leadership had been forced to acknowledge a terrifying reality. Humanity couldn't be categorized, controlled, or fully understood. They were a living communication system that defied every existing protocol. Representatives from various galactic civilizations watched with a mixture of terror and grudging respect. Some saw a potential threat. Others saw the most significant evolutionary leap in galactic communication in millennia. "We're not asking for your permission," Emma stated clearly. "We're presenting a new possibility." The human strategy had multiple layers of brilliance. Transform communication into a dynamic, living system. Challenge fundamental assumptions about technological progression. Make understanding itself a resource-intensive process. Create uncertainty as a strategic and diplomatic tool. Commander Izixolar, now a diplomatic advisor, understood the deeper implications. Humanity had done something unprecedented. They had weaponized potential itself. Not through military might, but through an approach to communication that made traditional concepts of invasion obsolete. Marcus Rodriguez monitored global communication networks, ensuring every transmission supported their diplomatic approach. Each quantum burst was a carefully calculated message, demonstrating humanity's ability to exist in multiple strategic states simultaneously. The concordance was being forced to create an entirely new diplomatic protocol. Humanity would serve as the unpredictable variable that challenged every existing interstellar relationship. "We're not seeking conquest," Emma explained. "We're offering a different perspective on existence." Lyra Kittle translated the deeper philosophical implications. Humanity wasn't just another species to be cataloged. They were a fundamental reimagining of what intelligent communication could be, a living, adaptive system that transformed the very concept of interaction. The diplomatic chamber itself seemed to respond to the human presence. Quantum-stabilized walls shifted and rippled, reflecting the uncertainty that humanity had introduced to galactic relations. Jack's final presentation demonstrated the true depth of their approach. It wasn't about defeating the concordance. It was about showing a completely different approach to interstellar existence, one where communication was a fluid, adaptive process rather than a fixed set of protocols. "We're not here to replace your systems," he explained. "We're here to demonstrate that there are alternative ways of existing." The representatives from various civilizations understood the profound nature of the moment. Humanity had done more than defend against an invasion. They had fundamentally challenged the entire concept of technological and cultural development. Commander Zexelar approached Emma after the proceedings. "You didn't just save your planet," he said quietly. "You transformed our understanding of what's possible." Emma's response was characteristically concise. "We're just getting started." As the diplomatic chamber dissolved, one thing became terrifyingly clear. Humanity was no longer just another species in the galactic catalog. They were architects of a new way of existing. The silence that had once been their greatest weapon was now their most powerful diplomatic tool.